part 3 of Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, basic tenets of our faith, and my problem with so-called modern Christianity. We're going to get into it here, and we're going to lead with Scripture. Now, I'm reading from Matthew 7 in the Berean Study Bible. We are going to start in 21, verse 21, okay? Just so that everyone knows, if you're not aware, that the red text is when Jesus is speaking. So this is Yahushua speaking. This entire blurb is Matthew writing down his words. Okay. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and perform many miracles in his name? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Lawlessness. The basic tenets of our faith. This is very simple. Lawlessness, to be without the law. And that many of the modern Christianity faiths, denominations, churches, so-called, are basing that the law is done away with. Okay? We're going to get more into Matthew here, but let that be the beginning. Okay? This should be the most bone-chilling scripture in the New Testament. Not everyone who calls out to me, Adonai, Adonai, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay? And they did miracles in his name, and drove out demons in his name, and prophesied in his name. These are miracle performers, and exorcists, and prophesiers, accurately prophesying, it seems, in his name. And he says, you workers of lawlessness. Lawlessness. That's verse 23. If we look at the many versions here, New Living Translation, you who break God's laws. There's the King James. Ye that work iniquity. Iniquity. Okay? That's to be without the law. Once again, lawlessness. To be without the law, right? You who practice lawlessness. He's like, it's, and some of these, the NASB 1977 and the New American Standard Bible, and several of these are all capitalized. Depart from me, you who act wickedly. And it's like Amplified Bible is like, you who are banished from my presence, you who act wickedly, disregarding my commands. It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. But then people will say, okay, what are the commands? We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to stay on the base tenets of our faith here. I think there's so much in Matthew in this one blurb. A tree and its fruit is its headline, okay? So we're going to go a couple verses back, and we're going to go to verse 15. This is Matthew 7, verse 15. Beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruit you will recognize them. So it's really important here, first off, Jesus himself, the man, Yahushua, who is God, The deity, the fullness of deity dwelled within him, Peter says. He says, beware. You should obviously be taking heed here, right? Every word, obviously. That's why it's all in red. But this may be a little. You're just like, beware. And you're like, oh. We have to beware of false prophets. These are the wolves in sheep's clothing. People going out saying that they're from him and then doing something completely wrong. You're supposed to condemn those people publicly, Paul says. I alluded to it earlier. Once again, we'll get to it later. Um, it's really important that we know that there is a tree and it bears good fruit, and there's a bad tree and it bears bad fruit. Okay? And there's a tree that should be grafted in, even if you're not from the the branch of that tree, you could be grafted in. Do you understand? And that these basic ideas of our entire faith is like right here. So then, by their fruits, you will recognize them. Let's see. If we go through, that's verse 20. If we see some, if we can, we'll know them by your fruits. Recognize them. How do you recognize something? You have to judge it. There's this weird mainstream problem where they say, oh, judge not, or ye shall be judged. And it's like, don't judge hypocritically. It's not saying to not judge at all. It says, open your mouth, judge righteously in Proverbs, but that would be in that part of the Bible that most people don't read. Regardless, it is repeatedly saying that you have to judge, but you have to judge righteously, not hypocritically. If you're doing something bad, you don't go out there and be like, "Oh, you don't do that." Like you're doing lines of coke, and then you go and you're like, "Hey, why are you doing those lines of coke?" God hates hypocrites. It's like one of the things that he like 7 things he hates. It's like it's an abomination to him. So that's in Proverbs too. You should go check it out. Why is it all this wisdom missing from the most? They want to take the wisdom out. They want to take the standards out. It's very modern. And that's the problem that we are not addressing, that needs to be addressed, and these basic tenets of the faith is missing. So I want to go back and answer the question, what commands are we talking about? We're jumping ahead into Matthew 22, and we're going to start here in verse 34. This BSB, once again, I'm reading from, has a little heading here, the greatest commandment. All right, and it's you got a direct quote here that you can reference to in Deuteronomy 6:1, which we'll go to, I'm surprised that it doesn't have the other quote of Leviticus, but we'll get to that as well, because these are the base tenets of our faith, and then I will expound and then end with some remedies in the next portion. Expound and end in the next portion. Okay, so 34. And when the Pharisees heard, okay, the Pharisees is referring to, forgetting how, Parashim, I think it says in Hebrew. I'm not sure now. I'm not sure. But Pharisees are a particular group who are following the Babylonian Talmud. That's the descendant of them today is modern rabbinical Judaism. And they had a particular way with all these boundary laws that have become, or according to the great Rabbi Yahushua, a burden to people. And Yah's ways is not to be a burden. It's meant to be life. It's meant to be life. It's meant to be a blessing. Like we see a problem in modern Christendom. What do you think? Why? We're not in Christian communities doing Christian things, and if you do not follow the ways, the blessing and the curse I alluded to earlier, you'll be ripped out of your land. The curse. Look it up. We'll get up to that in the next one, I think. So, they're also going to talk about the Sadducees, and that's another group of Yahudim, Jewish people at that time. But they could be some of the people that came back from the diaspora in Babylon. I'm not 100% sure, but they basically are all Yahudim. All Yahudim. I don't even know why I brought that up. I'm not even sure if that's true. Sadducees, but they were the Greek versions. They had Greek thoughts. It wasn't Hebraic. They had actually already tossed out large portions of the faith, despite not being that far removed from it. We're farther removed, and they were just tossing out, like, why? I don't know. Maybe because I don't know if maybe there was a lot of people that were illiterate at that time, but I mean, I see denominations doing crazy stuff today, and their people are literate. It's just they believe a charismatic leader or something like that. Okay, so the Sadducees were the Greeks, and they basically threw away a whole bunch of the faith for more Greek ideas, and but they had their redeeming qualities too. Like the Pharisees and the Sadducees had their redeeming qualities. Like they're like, let's not fool ourselves about history being this, like, oh, these people were bad people. Like they're in this era. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were not doing us too good. We'll say that. Okay, so yeah, so the Sadducees are always trying to get Yeshua, and so are the Pharisees. They're trying to trip him up in the temple, because the actual way that the faith was practiced at that time was people would go to the temple or synagogue, I guess, and they would talk about the law, and someone would read the law, and people who knew the law would discuss the law. All right, so important. I mean, and okay, we'll get other places at other times, but we just need to get that all out of the way so that people will understand this, because people will say, oh, don't judge, like I mentioned earlier. It's completely out of context and not know anything actually about what it means. They'll take it completely out of context. Oh, you're not supposed to judge. How the heck is that the conclusion if you read the actual passage? Okay. And when the Pharisees heard that Jesus, Yahushua, had silenced the Sadducees, they themselves gathered them together. One of them, an expert in the law, capital L, tested him with a question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Capital L. Jesus declared, red text here, Lord, love the Lord your God, that's Yahuwah Eloheinu, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Now, I love, this is what we should be using the internet for. Bible Hub. Because you can just zoom in, you see that there's a footnote here. Let's go to it. Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. It directly refers to two commandments, not on the 10, in Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. And that's what we're going to be reading in the next portion. Maybe I'll get to the other topics that I touched on earlier, but I'm trying to keep on this focused on what we're supposed to be talking about, and then I'll tell you what James and Paul said what we should do. I mean, simple. I mean, it's all there, but people are deciding that other people who pass down other things is what matters. Okay, we're so far removed, but we don't need to be. Okay, see you in the next part. God bless.